Welcome to Ask an Expert with Scott McNamara from University of Northern Iowa. He's an expert. There he is. And we have Ann Griffin, who's also going to join us tonight from Grantwood AEA. And so both of them are going to collaborate. They're colleagues from afar, but actually are real believers in this work and supporting all children to make sure that they get what they need. So they will be talking to us tonight about extracurricular activities and best practices. I know it's a small group, so please, if you have questions, throw them in the chat. Scott's going to share some slides, and Ann, feel free to join in and share some thoughts or examples that you can. And we are going to do this again in the fall, and from a different lens. So maybe Scott, you can collaborate with Ann, and then we can offer this for more families again from other lenses and opportunities. So we're excited to have you all here tonight, small but mighty. And thank you so much for joining Ask an Expert with Scott.
All right. Hello, everyone. I see we got a few people, and please feel free to use that chat box. And if you have any questions, and thank you, Ann, for joining as well. And, Ann's a last minute kind of recruit, but Ann has I'm sure that she could run this without any slides and no preparation because the amount of experience she has. There was a presentation I did last week. So, some of the stuff I'm not going to review, but we talked about the laws and we talked about what is adaptive physical education and talked a little bit about the broader scope of what adaptive physical activity is. So if you have kind of questions about federal stuff, you can absolutely still ask them, but there is that piece on there. So I'm not going to go into some of those things that I went into last time. Going over just what we're going to talk about today. So something that I started kind of riffing on last time was just about students with disabilities experience in physical education. And I just pulled up a slide or two that could maybe exemplify what the literature and kind of even my experience of what kids with disabilities sometimes experience in a physical education realm. And then we'll talk a little bit about best teaching practices in adaptive physical education and some stuff about extracurricular activities. Again, given the time and kind of format of this, where I would love to get some people to kind of chime in. So I started out, now I'll read it aloud, but this is a quote from a child with a physical disability in an integrated physical education class I'm going to read. It says, everyone started shuffling around, shouting, "Be with me. Tom, here, quick. Let's go over there. But none of this is for me. No looks, no stares now. I'm on my own. No one wants to be with me. When Josh is put with me, he's not happy and lets everyone know. Why me? It's not fair. Some of them look relieved and mock him. Unlucky Josh. I told you not to stand so close." So even though this quote's about 10 years ago now, I read a paper yesterday that was kids with visual impairments that basically said exactly the same thing. How do you think they felt about physical education? So probably not great, right? This thing that we talk about a lot as well is inclusion, and is inclusion occurring here? Likely not. And again, I'm just highlighting this because we started talking about it last time, and often, again, I kind of want to just stress the importance, because I think that physical education should be a place that students with disabilities, and especially more severe disabilities, get a huge amount of educational benefits from. I've said this last time, but I'm biased, but I truly feel this way, especially kids with more severe disabilities. I think it is the most important academic subject that they can learn. I would say that to any math instructor. But the reality is that people that, for a variety of reasons, and they're administrative, and they're sometimes training, and there's sometimes all these, equipment and all these pieces, money and all these things, that this seems to be the rule rather than the exception, is that we have kids with disabilities often not having a positive experience.
Yeah, absolutely. The whole idea of physical I would want to agree with Scott. Physical education, I think, for all kids, but particularly for kids with disabilities, is a life skill. It is the most important class in their education. It is the most important subject in their day. And we don't pay enough attention to the kid's experience. Many times we don't even ask the student, do you like going to that phys ed class? For whatever reason, some are administrative, but many times, the whole idea of least restrictive environment, IEP teams, very well-meaning, will say, oh, yes. And parents will say, well, yes, I want them to be with their gen ed peers. But they don't really know what being with their gen ed peers looks like in physical education. And if you're not really a part of it, you don't feel so good about it. And Scott and I are passionate not only about the subject, but about kids' experiences. I mean, we want, I've had phys ed teachers all over the AEA say, Ann, what do you want me to do with these kids? And I said, I want them to be smiling and sweating at the end of class. So smiling and sweating does not sound like what this young person was experiencing, but that's what we're shooting for, is smiling and sweating. And just putting kids with disabilities in a gen ed setting, particularly in physical education, for a lot of reasons, doesn't necessarily guarantee an inclusive setting. Those are very distinct sorts of things. So you have to pay attention to the student, and you have to pay attention to the teacher and the environment. But yeah.
On that, again, I said this a lot last time, so I apologize for repeating myself, but physical education is very unique, and it sometimes is the one place where students with disabilities are put in with their general ed peers. However, their bodies put on display in a very unique fashion. So their bodies and their quote unquote mistakes maybe are put on display in a very unique way, and this can cause a lot of issues. So just kind of going on, this is, again, I'm not trying to hit this too much because I talked about it briefly last time too, but some things that we know and things about this, but like students often have very few positive social interactions with their peers without disabilities in physical education. Even though we're putting them in there, if we're not doing the things that need to happen, and again, I think that physical education, if not done properly, is a ground where social hierarchies are made very quickly. And again, that then can exclude kids that might not have the same motor proficiency as their peers. So again, it's something to be very cognizant of, because we see it's right for things like ridicule, being isolated, or bullying. And having those experiences in physical education, obviously most people think about things like physical activity, exercise. And there's a large, seems to be some correlation between these negative attitudes and the fact that we know that students or people with disabilities in general have much higher rates of obesity and much lower rates of being physically active. There's again a lot of factors that go into that. We'll talk about extracurriculars in a little bit. There are a lot of barriers to them getting into extracurricular events or fitness, places as well. But these negative experiences that they're having in physical education are absolutely, in my eyes, and the research on this maybe isn't as clear because it's hard to research, but they very much go into this thing of, for that person with a disability and everyone that's watching that person with a disability struggle, that physical activity is not for them, which is malarkey. So that, that physical activity is for them. It's for everybody, right? So again, if we don't have a quality physical education experience, which means oftentimes having someone specially trained consult or run the program, or having paraprofessionals there, we're looking at the least restrictive environment, all these things that we should be considering in the IEP process. Because again, these things can be quite detrimental. And again, I think that physical education, when not ran properly or ran in a very large setting, can get very, very messy and very, very traumatic for students with disabilities. And I think that's really a word that I would like to say is traumatic. Now we're going to kind of switch over. I have some stuff on talking just about some best practices, because we talked a little bit what it is last time and federal laws and kind of what is that. So now what could this look like a little bit, or what are some of the things that we could see here? So things like, and I just kind of glossed over some, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about assistive technology, because that's kind of the cool and, fun stuff to kind of see. But, we could see things like additional cooperative games, or an emphasis on these things, communication, problem solving skills. I've seen this oftentimes used when I worked at a day school, or a school where kids with emotional disabilities were at. So basically our entire program in physical education worked around cooperation, leadership, communication, problem solving skills. Because again, it doesn't have to be that they have a physical disability to get adapted physical education or special, services. Another great one is using trained peer models to demonstrate tasks and be a role model. This is when I was teaching back in right outside of Detroit. And we had our football team come over and they did a field day with the kids with disabilities, and it worked out pretty well. And we used them for a few times as the trained peer models, which we know is a very motivating thing, especially for the older kids. And then modifying and adapting rules and equipment to allow students to be successful. So again, and this really is just almost good pedagogy right here. But like, if you're seeing if you're walking into the PE class, even if it's in high school and all you're seeing is 5-on-5 basketball, that's inappropriate. We want to play small-sided games. We want to modify rules. We want to modify equipment. So, and here's just a very small example out of the millions that we can make. But one that we commonly will see is where we'll see hula hoops, and sometimes they're stacked on top of each other, so kids can make a basket at different lengths, because some kids aren't going to be able to have the power or the form to get up to that 10 feet. So we can modify it and lower that rim either by actually lowering it or putting hula hoops. Again, this is, I'm sure Ann and I are seeing, this is 101 of kind of modifications, but some ideas of what this could look like.
Can I jump in on go back to your last slide just a second? Okay, one, adapted physical education begins with great physical education. So as Scott was saying, if it's inappropriate in gen ed, for sure it's inappropriate for kids with disabilities. Secondly, the other point that Scott made a little bit ago is many times kids with disabilities are included in physical education or what they call specials, PE, art, music. They're included in those with gen ed peers, but sometimes, particularly at the middle school, high school level, they don't necessarily know those peers before they get to phys ed. So they may be their peers, but they don't know each other. So the kids without disabilities don't know the kids with disabilities, and then they don't know how to communicate. And if you can't communicate, you can't participate together and you can't cooperate. So the use of cooperative games and group problem solving is instrumental in getting kids with disabilities and without disabilities to know each other. It's also really, really helpful for the phys ed teachers to get to know these kids too, because these are complicated students. They may have behavior plans, they may have communication devices, they may be nonverbal, they may have atypical ways to move, they may have individual behavior plans. The phys ed teachers don't necessarily know all of that. So the other point to remember is that many students with disabilities do need somebody who's specially trained. And in Iowa, our physical education teachers are doing really an amazing good job, but they are required to have 1 3-hour class in adapted physical education. And that, according to the state, licenses them to teach or deliver specially designed instruction in physical education. That's not much training. That's not nearly enough training. So they do the 101 and they do that very well, but many times your kids deserve more, and those PE teachers also deserve more. And you can address that in the IEP as well.
So, and I'm going to go through a few slides. This is just kind of a slide about what assistive technology is. I think, if you have students with disabilities, a lot of them, a common thing we'll see is assistive technology. And this is just a way to kind of think about it as far as that PE teachers can use it too, and a variety of it. And Anna is kind of an expert with equipment. And so I just grabbed some things and I highlighted them. And if it's okay, Deb, I was going to share a video or the videos as long as the audio works of some of it in play. But I broke it up because there's kind of low, mid, and high tech. And so I kind of broke it up that way.
Yeah, that's great.
So, again, these are and this is low tech things. So these are things that can help a lot of students be very successful and, don't require a lot. And a lot of times either your PE teachers might not know about these things. They might usually bowling ramps they're knowledgeable about, but even Velcro gloves that they have a hard time grasping, simple switches for communication. And then I'll highlight guide ropes real quick, which are things specific for kids with visual impairments. But again, like these are things that a lot of our PE teachers might not know of or think of, and things that someone like Ann Griffin, who works at the Grantwood AEA, is often going to be supplying. But I think she's the only district that's doing that type of stuff where they have that stuff ready to go.
So then that's great for Grantwood AEA, but how do we help this? What can families do to be an advocate to say, there's more that my child can do than sit on the bench and watch everybody, or be
Sure.
the goalie when we know that they could be moving? So what are some strategies or ideas that, or where could they go to find this information? Because to me, this is about all. And how do we help families find the all for their kids?
So I think stuff like this a little bit, even what I'm showing, like hopefully what I'm showing a little bit says, why isn't this happening? And, I know I talked about this last time, but like, sadly, I think that parents have a burden, and the burden's not that they have a disability. The burden is that they have to advocate, because if they don't, no one else will. That's the burden. The burden's not a child with a disability. The thing is that that other people are not doing what they should be. I think the first part is knowing and being aware that this stuff even exists, because I don't think that many, that they go into a PE, and administrators, they go into a PE class and they see kind of just, moving and a child on the sidelines doing scorekeeping, and they're like, great job. But it can be much more than that.
Here is a way. So I have a few solutions for you. One, and Scott talked about this, I'm sure, last week, are the new guidance document that was just adopted by the Department of Ed. So that's sort of the rules. That says what is the law, what are the rules, what are the rights and responsibilities. 2, what parents should do is get their paperwork right. So when you go to an IEP, and Scott has journal articles and checklists about what should you know about physical education and what should you know about how you can help physical educators. So one, if you need data about how is your child doing in physical education. So that PE teacher should be at that IEP team meeting and should be able to give you information about that. 2, those PE teachers, one of the things, so if the student is not making progress in the general physical education curriculum, then they should have a goal about that on the IEP. There is a place on the IEP that you have to check general, modified, or specially designed instruction in phys ed. Prior to December, there were no rules in Iowa about that. So 1, parents need to know what are the rules, and 2, how to impact the IEP. So make sure you have data to make the decision about what does your student need in physical education. If they need special education supports in PE, that should be put in that legal document. And if it's in there, that's right. The other thing that parents can do big time to help the profession is say there is a drop-down menu on the F page for services, and it says support for the general education teacher. One of the drop-down menu items is adapted physical education consultant. As Scott said, I am the only one in the state hired by the AEA. That does not mean that the service is not available. Okay, now who is going to provide it? They're going to have to figure that out. But every other AEA in this state has someone who is designated as the person who will figure out who is supposed to provide the support. It could be that they need to hire some people. I absolutely know they need to hire people. They need to hire professionals to help the physical educators, and they need to give them more education. But if we get the paperwork right, and it says on there, I need an adapted physical education consultant, for instance, every time the unit changes. I need to know, how is this kid going to do hockey? Then I need to know, how are they going to do gymnastics? Then I need to know, what are we going to do about basketball? And now I need to know about lifetime leisure. If that is written in the IEP, then the AEAs will need to prioritize probably FTE. people to provide that service. In some AEAs, they're saying, well, our physical therapists are doing that. And physical therapists will say to me, and they will say to parents, I don't have a teaching license. I know nothing about physical education pedagogy. I know how they move. And it, like Scott said, it's not just kids with physical disabilities who need adapted physical education. It's any kid with a disability for whatever reason. Could be social problems, it could be communication problems, it could be behavior problems, it could be a combination of all of those problems. But parents need to know probably everything Scott talked about last week. And that guidance document is posted on the website, but there has been no rollout and no training. It's a huge positive step. The state has a lot more to do, but we can help them by saying, you need to provide the service that my kid needs. And the best way to do that is know, what does your kid need? What are they providing now? And then specify what's not being provided and make sure that's in the IEP.
On the Ask website, Anne, is the checklist that Scott shared with us.
Perfect.
Which is aligned with the new rollout from the Department of Ed. So again, I encourage folks to get to our website. And obviously you're a resource that either Scott or Anne can be a resource to follow up with, because families need to know, you don't know what you don't know. And how do I advocate? And you're right, they're going to have to, but now it sounds like there's a little more behind it that it can happen.
Precisely. They really didn't want us to know before, and now we do have the rules and we know. So,
and I'm just going to kind of go through some of these, and I'll highlight like 2 of these videos that I have. So, low tech, again, another one is like just different types of balls. And this is like, there's, as Anne knows, there's a lot of different types of PE related balls. We have, either it's, colors for sensory or motivation, or maybe if they're visually impaired, we can have different contrast. These Sport Max balls, which I'm not sure if they actually still make or not, and Anne would totally know that, but these are, where the hand placement should go when I'm shooting. I really like these Sport Times slow motion soccer balls, especially, and they're very slow. They help out. They're, again, sensory stuff going on. They put sandbag kind of stuff in it, so they go really, really slow, so they're helpful. And then we have different types of bell balls, so balls with bells in them. Again, kids with visual impairments get a lot out of them, or sensory things. And I've also worked a lot with kids that are severe and profound. All of these, maybe not Sports Max, but these other types of balls are really, really helpful with kind of engaging with that group as well. Some mid-tech stuff is, and I could highlight a bunch of things, but, we have beeper balls and beepers. And I used to put a metronome behind a basketball board, and I'd tape it, and it would make the noise, right? And I worked with kids with visual impairments a lot, as you might be seeing, but, making noise and seeing where is it? And again, and talking pedometers. And then I'm going to highlight a video, and these are multi-step level switches. So, again, getting a little bit more in there, but this is something that a colleague of mine, Brad Weiner, who's in Maryland, he has an awesome video, and I always highlight this. Doesn't even need audio, but he makes this video, and I always show it to all my students to get them kind of thinking about what like adaptations can look like. And he's just he rigs stuff around with pulley systems, with PVC pipe, and this was for kids with severe and profound disabilities. And he made, this is skee ball right here. He made these recreational or physical education activities very meaningful for the kids that maybe struggle with grasp, struggle with strength. And again, I highlight this just because I think that he demonstrated there's no sport, there's no activity that we can't think of in a new way for our kids to be physically active. And again, he's got all these systems kind of going, and I know Brad pretty well. And one of the things that he does, and I'll show this to you. So like this is him doing a football throw. All right. And Anne has done this again. Anne has stuff, and I think she shares it to all the AEAs or some of it. And she has it more sophisticated than this, but he's created something for kids to have a TheraBand. They pull on it and it's going to throw. And what's really cool about this, and some of this is low tech things, and here's sensory things or things to get the kids to kick. What he has here, which is pretty cool, is when this goes into the box here, there is a system of multi-step switches that then go over here to a lawn blower that then blow and say, hurrah, we just did something really awesome. So again, and I'll show this a few different times. I highlight this because, and I always show all my kids in my adaptive physical education college courses, because I want them to think about what are the possibilities. And, again, this is really difficult stuff sometimes for our first, second, third year PE teachers to be making, but there is kind of endless possibilities for these things when we're talking about what all of these things can look like. Let's see if there's any other. I'll show the croquet. So he does golf, and he actually has a whole 3 other videos that kind of highlight doing outdoor recreation. Here's croquet. He's got a PVC pipe with a croquet mallet. And again, these things aren't super sophisticated. If you go into Ann's warehouse, you'll see some more sophisticated equipment. But these are, again, just thinking about how can my child play it? And to say that they can't do something is not incorrect. It just means that we haven't put the creativity and the knowledge base all together. I'm going to pause it here because it keeps going on in different kind of realms. And like I said, there's kind of different facets that he highlights. But Ann, do you want to comment?
Yeah, just one comment. Always the question that I ask the phys ed teachers, it's how can we all play? So it isn't if we are going to, but how can we? What Scott just showed you is that there are lots of ways to solve problems. There are inventions and innovations, and there are lots of low-tech, no-tech solutions to things. And he keeps referring to my warehouse. I actually had, so check our website as well, but we had a partnership with Rockwell Collins Retiree Volunteers. So we had rocket scientists designing things for us and then making the equipment for us. So I have a warehouse that distributes the equipment area wide, and we're working on making it at least 4 AEAs wide. So that's another project. But all of the equipment that they made, so we had switch activated bowling ramps, we had bocce ball ramps, we had big basketball rims, and when you shot a ball through, it would go, yay, or you could record and go, yay, you made it. And big ball launchers that would, shoot a basket, serve a volleyball, punt or pass a football. But they also gave us the plans to make all of that equipment for free, which is still available on our website. So check out Grantwood AEA website, Grantwood, GWAEA.org, and all of the plans that those guys made are on there as well.
Yeah, and has like blueprints on there that can be shared to other PE teachers or other special ed departments on how to make those things. So just to highlight, and I'm going to highlight a few things. I'm going to come back to this one here because this is kind of gets into sports, this video at least, but high-tech stuff. So these are beep baseball kits, and these basically buzz. And I used to bring this into my general ed PE class, and I bring kids with disabilities for my other class. And this is always a big hit with all my, and I incorporated disability sport. And I'll highlight this because this is a true disability sport. So this is a sport that's made for people with disabilities versus a modified sport that's, an able-bodied sport that's modified for people with disabilities, but it's really cool, and I'll highlight it real quick. Exergaming is another thing we use, we still use, and PE teachers use the old Wii's and, Xbox Connects and all that, and do a bunch of fun stuff. We still do DDR and all these things that are, Dance Dance Revolution that are getting a little older now. Sport-specific wheelchairs. These are really, really nice. So I always hate when I go, and again, these are things that you have to advocate for. A lot of times health insurance places won't pay for these types of wheelchairs, but if you can get your hands on actual sport specific wheelchairs, they're awesome. And then there's all these computers and apps. I'm going to highlight one real quick. And I know Ann has opinions on it. I do too. But this is a pretty popular one, which is the Exercise Buddy. And it's nice because it's created specifically for PE. It is, I think, about $30 or something per. But what it does allow is it allows you to individualize content, and it's created for kids with autism specifically. But really what it does is it manages, it shows videos oftentimes of the correct exercise. There's a few that are incorrect. It shows video models, though, of exercises conducted with children with autism. It has social stories like this one right here, task analysis and visuals, all related to working with kids with autism. So again, and there's a website here, and Exercise Buddy app is a pretty popular one, and it breaks things down. It has things, all the things that we see with autism. It has a first then, or you have all these visuals and you can make visual schedules. And it's something easy for the APE teacher to use, PE teacher, special ed teacher. And I know some parents are using it as well in their homes just to do like more exercise routines and such. So I'm going to go back real quick though, and I'm going to highlight, just before we start talking about sports, I'll highlight this video of a beep baseball tournament, because again, it's its own sport. So what this sport looks like though is there's two buzzing bases, there's a beeping baseball, and there's two bases, there's not 4 bases, there's 2 bases. And what's also unique right here is this person is blindfolded who is batting. I also play kickball. Kickball's a little simpler, a little easier. The pitcher is on their team. So the pitcher is on the team of the batter because it's very easy to strike out, somebody who's blindfolded. So they're on their team. They get 4 strikes instead of 3. And then when they go, they listen, and that ball is buzzing the entire time or beeping. And then when they do get a good hit, and you'll see, and it gets pretty intense, and there is outfielders who are also blindfolded, and all they have to do to get an out is they have to get it and then put it above their head and say, got it. There's often a fielder out there also telling people where to go. But then on the other end, if they get it and they catch it and they say, got it, that's an out, unless this person who's listening to the buzzing gets to the base. So again, and I'm just going to highlight this one real quick because these, especially if you have a kid with a specific type of disability, these are sports that are for people with disabilities. I always try to incorporate these types of sports into general PE classes. I think that's honestly, like, to me, that's would be a great thing if you're doing a baseball lesson in high school to do a day or 2 on this. And in my experience, the general PE students love it. And I do the same thing. I do volleyball, bring in sitting volleyball. If you're going to do, other ones are, sometimes you need chairs and stuff like that, but like wheelchair basketball, a big part of things that we can do and highlighting the empowering disability, I think, in a way that's really unique. So again, this is just to kind of get our wheels turning on things that are possible. And your PE teachers could also be teaching units to this. I went to Texas Women's University, and one of the professors there was Ron Davis, and we'll talking a little bit about extracurriculars and sport. He used to say something like sport is sport. And that maybe sounds simple, but the idea is that we should not be putting a hierarchy on sport. So, I do this all the time. Basketball is my favorite sport. So when I talk with my cousins or friends about sports, it's basketball is better than all the other sports. But that is not a good kind of thing to say, because again, sport is about self-expression. It's about improvement. It's about enjoyment and physical activity in general. We want to empower and appreciate all types of sports, whether those be disability sports, adapted sports for people with disabilities, or just the type of sport, right? So ping pong should have its realm, and we should be respecting it for being a place that people can be happy just as much as we should with football, especially in the realm of physical education, because not everyone wants to be a football player. Some barriers, though, that we have for participation in sport for individuals with disabilities. So I know this was a big kind of thing. So here, just highlighting some things that we see often that are barriers for kids with disabilities or individuals. We do have that they have a lack of understanding sometimes of the fitness concepts that they need to be proficient. Again, this is something that physical education should be helping with. Accessibility is often something as well. And again, these are things that we should be advocating for, trying to get. And then lack of trained professionals. To me, this is probably one of the biggest ones. So you think it's bad with physical educators, go into the coaching realm, and you've just gone down a few feet, as well as people that are used to working with people with disabilities. In a few slides, I'll talk a little bit more about this, but a lot of times coaches and such, and a lot of your PE teachers also want to be coaches. So they're always teaching towards those athletes. again, this is in lack of programs that are appropriate for them. We'll talk in a little bit, but football teams are allowed to say no to students with disabilities if they have a tryout process that's for everyone. And so what are the programs for the kids that don't make the varsity football team? What are they? Are they viable? Are they things, do we have a good, robust programming in our extracurriculars for kids with disabilities? We also have fear of failure. This is something I probably have seen the most of, is where kids with disabilities, either their parents or the child, were very afraid of, again, putting their bodies on display and all these things, even though they really wanted to. But there are a lot of things out there. There's a lot of benefits to it. And obviously there is the benefit of health and improving sports skills. And we know that the better the motor skills are, the more likely people are to be physically active. It gives people without disabilities a new perspective and develops social networks. So we know this. And again, one of the big things too is public awareness. So we're seeing right now with the Paralympics and Special Olympics, those things are huge avenues to promote disability in general. And to me, this is the biggest thing, is that sport is culture and sport is fun. And so I think there's this piece of just, we want kids with disabilities to do sport for sport's sake, to be able to do it because their peers can do it, enjoyment. Like, I don't need to say that there's a health benefit to it, because it's fun and it's part of all of our cultures have a huge aspect of sport. And it should be something that, and again, not everyone wants to do that, but a lot of people do. And we should be giving this opportunity to everyone in every type of fashion. And we should also not be saying one's better than the other, or all this crap that often is spewed constantly. So I only got one more slide on this, and this is highlighting some track and field for somebody that's a chair user. And this is a sitting volleyball photo, and just things to keep in mind. And again, there's so much more I could talk about on all of these subjects. And I was just going to highlight a few of these things. Hopefully you've seen some of them, but Camp Abilities is a sports camp for kids with visual impairments. They have one, it ran in June. They will be running at the University of Northern Iowa. It's a full week camp. They do Paralympic type sports. Special Olympics is probably the one that people know the most about. They work with people with intellectual disabilities and sometimes autism as well. They have intellectual disability, then they qualify, and they do all types of events, and they do things at the local and regional and state and national and world level. So there's all types of kind of things always going on with that. But I thought I would just kind of highlight some ones that maybe are a little bit more off the beaten path. So here's Adapted Sports Iowa. They're kind of growing, and they had a big kind of session over this last 2 years, and they're trying to bring all the people that are doing adapted sports together in the state of Iowa. And they're a great resource as well if you want to advocate for getting extracurricular events or getting your child involved in sport. Another thing too is trained professionals. There's not always a great trained coach in the area that we want to, if you really want to get into the high levels. So going to a place like Adapted Sport Iowa is going to help align a child or a person with getting the right type of coaching they need. They have videos, and then they kind of have things about here's some different things. They have one on beat baseball, track and field, air guns, wheelchair basketball, just to highlight youth. They have just these different things, and you can find out more about them through going to these places, and you can register, and that they'll be in different places. A lot of these, there is a lot of times travel and such, but these are some cool things to kind of keep in mind. And this is, to me, the best resource that's at least attempting right now to bring all these sporting things together in Iowa, because oftentimes they're happening in a little pocket. I went to sessions, and they had us all kind of sit in a room and talk through this thing through. We did it online this year, which was cool too. This one's local in the Cedar Valley. The guy is Steve Hewsome, and I've had some conversations with him. He's an amputee, and he runs Adapted Sports Iowa golf clinics, and he does tournaments. He does kind of skill-based days where they learn about it for kids, and they do all disabilities. And they've bought local for all the golf courses. They bought different accessible chairs that will actually stand the child up so that they can do a proper golf swing. And so again, he's doing this, and he does it at the state level, he does it in the local area, And, here's more about his adaptive golf clinic. So he's showing us stuff. So they got, again, some of these things TBD, but they did it over in August before. And they do all types of kind of cool stuff and get all the kids into it. And it's for adults as well. Sportability is pretty well known, what I've seen so far in Iowa. That what I've seen so far, but I know they do more than this, but they do a big wheelchair basketball tournament. This is like one of the last things I did pre-COVID. I remember it was maybe 2 weeks before COVID. I went to one of their big tournament. And so they have it at all different kind of levels, kind of like Special Olympics does, where they have it leveled off based on competition level. So everyone's able to be competitive, and they bring people out to school sometimes. They're pretty active. And as far as I know they're pretty active in our community in Cedar Valley, but I know that they travel around and they do a variety of things. They have adapted sports camps. They have one specific basketball team, but they also kind of put on basketball tournaments for the wider community. They're always kind of doing all types of things. And this is actually, I can tell this is at UNI. This is actually the building I work at right here. They do all types of things down here. They have wheelchair tennis, power soccer. They're just a place that has a lot of things, because I think the problem sometimes, if you go back to those barriers, is not knowing what's available to you. These things could be made, and the one I've seen mostly is Special Olympics being made in the school level. We should be bringing these things into PE, and we should be bringing these things as an extracurricular option as well. However, that's so rarely the case. So my last slide really is just this, like, how do I advocate for these resources? As Deb brought up before, it was like, well, how, this stuff's all great and dandy, and I don't have a great answer. I really don't. I've been able now to go across the nation and see these things. I know they exist. And how do we get them in Iowa or, outside of one specific school? It's something, again, I think we have to work as a group. We have to, as Ann said, having that State Department legislation and guidance is a big step, but we need to continue pushing, because that thing that I showed you at the beginning of that child with physical disability, I think, again, that's that terrible experience of theirs it's the rule. It's not the exception. And we got to make that the exception rather than the rule. And again, I think, as Ann said, we have to get it in your IEPs. We have to inform our physical education teachers. We have to talk to school administrators. You need to complain, and that's, parents have a lot of the power here. And again, I highlighted this last time, that checklist is a great avenue to, that checklist that kind of goes through the IEP process and how to advocate is a great kind of tool to use in those IEPs, and something to share with the other IEP team. As Ann said before too, get your PE and AP teachers to attend the IEP meetings and have IEP documents. So Ann talked about having them in the IEP meetings. Yes, they should be there, especially if you're going to talk about their content in any way. Also, sadly, a lot of them don't have your IEPs. That's sadly the case as well. They don't have your BIPs. They don't have your IEPs. Is that out of compliance? Absolutely. So make sure that your physical education teacher has their IEP and is following it, as well as their BIPs and their, all those other things, because sometimes that communication line doesn't go to that PE teacher for all these reasons. Make sure your paras, ask them to be trained in PE and are actively engaged. There's always the tale of the amazing paras and always the ones that aren't so amazing. So we want to make sure that our paras are very well aware that they are in physical education, and PE is a curriculum. It's not a break time. All right. And there's a lot of strategies for your PE teachers to get that. Your PE teacher should be working with them, talking to them, giving them a space to kind of put their tennis shoes and their water bottles and working with them. But I've seen too many times. Again, I've seen some amazing paras. I've seen paras that probably some of the best people I've seen in the special ed process world are paras. But I've also seen a few taking out their phones or, 10 years ago, the newspaper during PE class. So that should not be happening. And then the last thing, and this thing I was trying to say earlier, but this was told to me by my mentor, and she told me that somebody told her this, and this is about advocating for adapted physical education. And she said, to me. It was at a bar once, and it was, if not you, then who? If not you, then who? And I tell that to my students on the last day of class in my adapted PE class, because if you don't do it, who is? And again, I think that sucks. That's sadly the case. But if you're not going to advocate for your child, and when I tell my PE teachers, if you're not going to advocate for your students, and if I'm not going to advocate for the field of adaptive physical education, well, then who is? That's kind of my last remark.
Well, thank you, Scott. Very well said at the end. Good reminder. And I really like the way you began, because those are real stories about real kids with real thoughts and feelings. And it's so easy just to tuck it away and say, oh, it doesn't matter, they're just fine. They'll engage when they want to. And that's not true. So very powerful. I'm excited to continue to collaborate with you, and Anne, of course, for you also, that we want families to know this is something that they do have power over and they can make better for their kids. And you said it so well. We want to make it fun for them. I mean, who doesn't like to have fun, right? So yeah, it was excellent. And thank you so much. Anne, thank you for joining. I didn't see any questions. We had a couple of participants. Again, this is being recorded. It'll be put on our website. And so then folks can go to the askresource.org and access it through the website down the road. So thank you again, and everybody have a great evening.
All right. Thank you.